Before this story begins, I need you to listen closely. What you are about to hear is not fiction, and though it may sound impossible, it was sent to me by someone who experienced it firsthand. The story comes from a small town in Vermont, USA, where the abandoned State Asylum has stood empty for decades. It's a place no one dares enter. Until last week, when a series of chilling events reached my inbox, and I knew I had to share them with the world. The sender, who wishes to remain anonymous, requested only that the details be told exactly as they experienced them. No edits, no dramatization, just the pure, terrifying truth. And so we begin. Part 1. The night air in Vermont was thick with fog, curling around the skeletal trees and blanketing the cracked roads with a damp, silent chill. Even the moon seemed hesitant, a pale observer, peeking through layers of mist, casting only the faintest of light across the abandoned streets. I had heard stories about the State Asylum before. Tales of missing patients, strange screams in the night, and shadowy figures that appeared and disappeared without warning. But nothing prepared me for what my anonymous sender recounted. It began with a call from a local resident who had been investigating the asylum for a documentary. They had discovered an old set of blueprints hidden in the town library, maps detailing rooms, hallways, and secret chambers that had long been sealed off. The asylum itself, built in the 1800s, had been the site of both medical innovation and tragedy. Some claimed the doctors were obsessed with experimental treatments, while others whispered of unethical practices, locked wards, and patients who simply vanished. At precisely 11:17 p.m., the resident entered the building through a collapsed side entrance. The cold metal doors groaned against the hinges, a sound that echoed down the long corridors, merging with the distant dripping of water from a shattered ceiling. The flashlight in their hand barely illuminated the crumbling walls, paint peeling like dead skin, and tiles cracked from years of neglect. Every step they took seemed amplified, the creak of their boots bouncing off the empty hallways as though announcing their trespass to some unseen audience. They followed the main hallway toward the central ward, a place where records indicated some of the most disturbing cases had been kept. The air grew heavier with each step, an almost tangible pressure pressing against their chest. That was when the first strange sound came. A soft, deliberate tapping from somewhere above, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through the empty space. "Hello," they called out, their voice trembling. No answer came, only the tapping continued. It wasn't random. It followed a pattern. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 5 slow ones. The residents' curiosity overrode their fear. They had a camera and recording equipment to capture the footage, and something inside compelled them forward, even though the rational part of their mind screamed to run. As they ascended a narrow staircase leading to the second floor, the temperature dropped dramatically. Each breath formed visible clouds, swirling in front of their face. The beam of the flashlight landed on a series of old patient doors, each with a number barely legible through layers of rust and decay. Some doors were ajar, others sealed shut with heavy metal locks. On one door, etched in the faded paint, were words scratched deep into the wood. "Do not open, ever." Ignoring the warning, the resident pressed on, documenting everything. That was when the real terror began. From the end of the hallway, A shadow detached itself from the wall, stretching impossibly tall, moving without sound. It had no discernible features, but its presence radiated something deeply unnatural. The resident froze, the flashlight flickering, as if the batteries themselves were afraid. And then came the whisper, a voice so low it seemed to vibrate within the bones, saying simply, "You shouldn't be here." Every instinct screamed to turn back, but before they could move, the shadow began to advance, gliding across the floor with a movement that defied the natural laws of physics. Panic set in, and the resident bolted, stumbling down the stairwell, camera bouncing in hand, catching fleeting glimpses of impossible figures moving just beyond the flashlight's reach. The whispering followed, multiplying into voices, each one speaking in languages long forgotten, filling the hallway with a cacophony of despair. Reaching the main entrance, the door that had groaned so heavily earlier now opened silently, as if inviting them to leave. They didn't hesitate, spilling into the cold night air, lungs burning, heart racing like it might tear itself from their chest. Behind them, the asylum loomed, silent again, as if nothing had happened. But the recordings told a different story. Figures glimpsed in hallways, doors opening by themselves, whispers captured clearly on the microphone, chilling and unmistakable. Over the next few days, the resident tried to contact local authorities and the Historical Society, but every attempt was met with skepticism and confusion. Some dismissed it as a hoax, others as an overactive imagination. But one night, they received an email, no sender, just a single line in the subject: "You were warned. We never leave." The sender of this email, the one who eventually shared all of this with me, claimed they had pieced together the asylum's tragic history. There were disappearances, certainly, but not all of them were accidental or forgotten. Some patients were never meant to leave. Their spirits, or something far worse, lingered, bound to the asylum in ways that defied human understanding. And so, the story continues. Each night, as the Vermont fog rolls across the abandoned streets, the asylum waits, waiting for curiosity, for trespass, for someone foolish enough to think they can uncover what has been hidden for over a century. The morning after the resident fled the asylum, the fog had lifted, leaving the town looking deceptively peaceful, but the air still held that metallic taste of fear, a residue of the night before. The recordings, now safely transferred to multiple hard drives, were examined frame by frame. Every flicker, shadow, and whisper was meticulously analyzed. What emerged wasn't just paranormal. It suggested intelligence, purpose. Something inside the asylum had been observing, waiting, and perhaps planning. Determined to understand, the resident returned the next evening, this time accompanied by a small team of fellow urban explorers. They were warned repeatedly, but curiosity is a powerful lure, and fear often takes a backseat to obsession. As they approached the crumbling facade, the familiar "keep out" signs flapped in the wind, whispering warnings in a language only the desperate or foolish would comprehend. Inside, the hallways seemed different somehow. The air was heavier, and the shadows thicker, as if the building itself were alive. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper with faded handprints and scrawled messages. One read, "We remember you." Another simply, Go back. The whispers started almost immediately, low at first, as though testing their resolve. Then louder, words forming from the echoes. You shouldn't be here. You don't belong. They paused at the staircase to the second floor. The faint glow of red light emanated from a distant window. The same window where the shadow had appeared the previous night. The team debated, but the resident insisted they had to see for themselves. Slowly, cautiously, they ascended. Halfway up, the temperature plummeted again, their breath misting in the beam of the flashlights. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. A woman in a tattered hospital gown, eyes hollow, skin pale as ash. She didn't move like a living human. Instead, she hovered, gliding across the floor, silent yet deliberate. One team member screamed, and the figure's head snapped toward them, mouth opening impossibly wide, a distorted cry that froze the blood in their veins. The team scattered, but the resident kept moving, documenting everything. They found a room with walls covered in decades-old photographs of patients, some with their eyes scratched out, others with faint, moving shadows captured in the corners of the frames. In the center of the room lay a journal bound in cracked leather. Opening it revealed entries written in a hurried, manic scrawl. Experiments, disappearances, and cryptic warnings about what inhabited the building now. As they read, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening, echoing from all directions. Doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The figure of the woman appeared again, this time accompanied by others. Shadows, barely visible but unmistakably human in form. Their faces twisted in silent screams. Panic consumed the team. The resident grabbed the journal and bolted toward the staircase. When they reached the main hallway, they realized the exit doors that had seemed so close the previous night were gone, replaced by a solid brick wall. The asylum wasn't just a building, it was a living trap. Every corridor twisted, rearranged, as if the structure itself were breathing. They turned down one hall after another, only to find themselves back where they started, each turn accompanied by whispers, footsteps, and the faint smell of decay. Hours felt like minutes, minutes like hours. Exhausted and terrified, the team finally found a small service elevator. Desperate, they activated it, descending into the basement. The air grew even colder, a stench of rot and chemicals filling their lungs. In the dim light, they saw cages, rusted and bent, some containing indistinguishable shapes that twitched unnaturally. The whispers became chanting, in a language none of them recognized. Yet every word carried meaning, threats, promises, and the memory of all the souls who had vanished here. The elevator doors opened to a maintenance tunnel that led to a concealed back exit. They emerged into the night, shaken, drenched in sweat, and carrying the journal that chronicled horrors no one alive should witness. But as they looked back, the asylum seemed still, silent, waiting, patient. And the fog began to rise again, curling around the skeletal trees like fingers reaching for the trespassers. The resident sent the journal, recordings and notes to me, insisting it must be shared with the world. People need to know, they wrote, that some places should never be entered, some doors never opened, and some warnings never ignored. That night, when the email arrived with the subject line, "We remember you," the sense of dread became personal. The asylum wasn't just a building. It wasn't just shadows. It was alive. And it had taken note of every intrusion, every curiosity, every act of defiance. And now, through the digital ether, it had reached out to warn others. Curiosity comes at a price, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Night fell once more over the sleepy Vermont town, but the residents slept uneasily, unaware of what had been unearthed in the long-abandoned asylum. Inside, the building seemed to breathe. Shifting corridors, creaking floors, and distant whispers that carried across the dark. The journal, now in the hands of the resident, contained cryptic instructions detailing rituals and observations that had once been performed by the asylum's staff, but had now taken on a life of their own. The resident returned once again, unable to resist the compulsion to understand. This time they brought a small thermal camera and audio recording devices to capture the phenomena with irrefutable evidence. Entering through the collapsed side entrance, they were immediately struck by an unnatural stillness. The air was heavy, dense, with a scent of decay mixed with antiseptic. Atfias, ghostly residue of the asylum's long-past medical experiments. The hallway was quiet at first. No tapping, no whispers, but the shadows began to move almost imperceptibly, curling and twisting along the walls. In the main ward, they found the infamous Room 6B, where some of the asylum's most secretive experiments had taken place. The door was sealed with rusted metal, yet the scratches warning "Do not open" had deepened as if freshly carved. When the resident pried it open, a sudden gust of frigid air erupted, extinguishing their flashlight. The thermal camera flickered to life, revealing dozens of heat signatures, human-like, but layered, overlapping, and moving unnaturally fast. Suddenly, the whispers escalated into chanting, and a figure appeared at the far end of the room. A man in tattered asylum garb, eyes black voids, skin stretched taut over bones. He raised his hand, pointing directly at the resident. The camera captured it, the audio recorder capturing his voice, though no words were recognizable. Only the tone of command and menace. As the resident backed away, the floor beneath them shivered, the building groaning like a living entity. The shadows congealed into forms, some resembling former patients, others shapes indescribable, all moving in silent synchronicity toward the intruder. Panic surged, yet the resident felt a strange compulsion to read aloud from the journal. The entries described specific wards, hidden passageways, and rituals to appease the dwellers, a code meant for those who dared to enter. Following the instructions, they recited the phrases exactly as written. The chanting began to falter, the temperature rising slightly. But the building's response was immediate. Walls warped, the ceiling sagged, and the shadows writhed in anger, forming grotesque faces that leered from every corner. The resident understood. This was not just a haunting. This was the asylum asserting itself, defending the memory of decades of cruelty, sorrow, and forgotten souls. Suddenly, a door slammed behind them. From the darkness, multiple figures emerged. Doctors in old uniforms, patients, even staff who had disappeared long ago. Some whispered pleas, others screamed, all eyes fixed on the resident. The air vibrated with energy, each exhale visible as mist. One patient stepped forward, pointing to the journal, a clear command to leave. Yet another set of words etched themselves in the air, glowing faintly. You are part of this now. Fear twisted into urgency. The resident fled through the corridors, the shadows in hot pursuit. The flashlight flickered, illuminating ghastly scenes. Cages filled with echoes of past screams. Medical instruments animated floating toward them. The sound of their heartbeat echoed in their ears, a syncopated rhythm matching the entity's movements. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a hallway leading to the main exit. For the first time, the asylum offered a glimpse of mercy. The doors, previously blocked by shifting bricks and walls, were open. But before leaving, the resident turned, just long enough to see the entire hallway pulsate. Shadows retreating into the walls, leaving behind a single word, etched in crimson on peeling wallpaper. Return. Out in the night, lungs burning, vision blurred. The resident realized the journal had recorded more than events. It had captured the asylum's consciousness. Every frame, every sound, every movement was a testament to the building's existence, its memory and its warning to all who dared enter. That night, they sent the footage, the journal, and detailed notes to me. The email subject line read, "Do not let curiosity lead you astray." It was simple, yet carried the weight of a threat, a promise, and a reality that no human should ignore. Even now, weeks later, residents report hearing whispers along the foggy roads leading to the asylum. Some claim to see lights flicker in the windows, figures in motion, shadows that move against the wind. And somewhere in the darkness, the asylum waits, patient, eternal, watching. The fog had returned in full force, curling around the skeletal remains of the Vermont asylum, like a living thing, breathing, waiting. The resident knew this would be their last return. They had learned that curiosity here carried a price too high for mere mortals. But duty, obsession, or perhaps something deeper urged them forward. The journal was clutched tightly, the flashlight casting long, trembling shadows on the peeling walls. The main hall greeted them as it had before, yet different. The whispers were louder now, almost coherent. Names, dates, commands, warnings, all mixed together into a torrent of sound that pressed against their ears. The shadow figures, once scattered and fragmented, had coalesced into distinct forms. Doctors, patients, staff, each one more menacing than before, floated, gliding along the hallways, observing, judging. They followed the journal's instructions to the final chamber, a room deep in the basement, previously sealed, known as the Memory Ward. The floor was cracked and covered in dust, but as they stepped inside, the walls pulsed, breathing almost. In the center lay a circle of faded chalk, symbols carved centuries ago still glimmering faintly. The resident understood immediately. This was the asylum's heart, the center of its consciousness. Every anomaly, every ghostly figure, every chilling whisper stemmed from this room. As they recited the final incantations from the journal, the air thickened. Shadows twisted violently, shrieking, retreating momentarily but never gone. Suddenly, one figure emerged from the circle. A woman, unmistakably the same one who had appeared on the stairs the first night. But this time, her face was clear, human, yet marked by centuries of pain and suffering. She spoke, her voice both terrifying and sorrowful. The building lives through memory, through pain. Leave and never return. Fail, and you become part of us. The resident froze, realizing that the asylum was not merely haunted, it was alive. It remembered, it observed, and it judged. The shadows closed in. Yet the journal seemed to act as a shield, a bridge between the living and the dead, allowing communication. One wrong step could mean eternal entrapment, joining the whispers forever. With trembling hands, they followed the last instructions, tracing symbols on the floor, whispering names of long-forgotten patients, acknowledging every soul trapped in the building. Slowly, the shadows began to dissolve, retreating into the walls, ceilings, and floors. The air grew warmer, lighter, the fog beginning to lift as though the building sighed in relief. Exhausted, drenched in sweat, the resident emerged into the cold Vermont night. The asylum, for the first time in decades, was silent. Yet silence was not peace. It was a temporary truce. The journal had recorded everything. Faces, voices, movements, and most importantly, the memory of the building itself. The resident knew they could never reveal all the details. Some things were meant only for the living to respect, not to expose. Weeks later, the resident contacted me again, sending the last of the recordings and notes. They emphasized one thing: tell them to listen, but never go. The asylum remembers, it waits, and so I shared this story with you. A chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Some places once entered leave a permanent mark on your soul. And somewhere in Vermont, the State Asylum still stands, patient, eternal, watching for the curious, the daring, and the foolish. If you ever hear whispers on a foggy night, or see a light in an abandoned window, remember, they never left. And sometimes, neither should you. Tonight's story was sent to us by a man who asked us to hide his real identity. For this story, we will call him Michael R. Turner. Michael was a long-haul truck driver from Barstow, California, USA. He said what you are about to hear is not fiction, not a creepypasta, but something that happened to him on a real American road. His final message ended with one sentence: the road doesn't kill you immediately, it lets you leave, and then it follows you back. Route 66 is often called the Mother Road. It cuts through America like a scar, stretching from Chicago to California. Millions have driven it. Families, tourists, truck drivers. But deep inside the Mojave Desert, there is a stretch of Route 66 locals avoid after sunset. No gas stations, no motels, no phone signal, just asphalt, sand, and silence. They call that stretch the Whistling Mile because at night, when the wind moves just right, you hear a sound. Not screaming, not crying, a long, hollow whistling sound, like someone calling you without using words. Michael had been driving trucks for over 20 years. He had driven through snowstorms, hurricanes, and dead quiet deserts at 3 in the morning. He didn't believe in ghosts. Fear to him was just exhaustion. That night, at exactly 12:43 a.m., He was hauling cargo westbound through the Mojave Desert. The desert was unnaturally calm. No wind, no animals, only the hum of the engine and the glow of the dashboard. Then the radio crackled. A long whistling sound slid through the static. Michael turned the radio off. The sound didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from outside. The headlights caught movement ahead. A man stood in the middle of Route 66, completely still. As Michael slowed down, he noticed the man was wearing old-fashioned clothing, something from the 1950s. Out there, in the middle of nowhere, it made no sense. Michael rolled down the window and shouted, asking if he was okay. The man slowly lifted his head. He had no eyes, just two dark, empty holes. And when he opened his mouth, the whistling came from him. Not a sound made by lips, but something deeper, like air moving through something hollow. Michael slammed the accelerator and drove. But when he checked the rearview mirror, the man was still there. He wasn't running. He wasn't walking. He was floating, inches above the road, matching the truck's speed perfectly. Then the radio turned on by itself. A distorted news broadcast played. It talked about a 1957 accident on Route 66 where 14 people died. Witnesses reported hearing a strange whistling sound before the crash. The radio cut to silence, and the whistling started again. This time, inside the truck, the air turned cold. The smell of dust, burnt rubber, and old metal filled the cab. Michael turned his head toward the back seat. The man was sitting there, smiling. His mouth was stretched too wide. Black liquid dripped from the empty eye sockets. He leaned forward and whispered, "You stopped for me. Now the road knows you." Michael doesn't remember what happened next. He woke up at sunrise. The truck was parked on the side of Route 66. The engine was cold. The clock on the dashboard blinked 12:43 a.m. Scratched into the asphalt beside the truck was a strange curved symbol, shaped like a mouth frozen mid-whistle. Michael finished his route and went home to Barstow. He didn't tell anyone, but that night, he heard the whistling again, faint, distant, inside his house. Over the next few nights, radios turned on by themselves. Old accident reports played through static. He began researching Route 66 and discovered the truth. In 1957, a tour bus broke down on that exact mile. A local mechanic stopped to help. 14 people vanished after the crash. No bodies were ever found. The mechanic was never identified. Locals only called him one thing: the Whistler. According to desert folklore, the Whistler was claimed by the road itself. Now he appears to those who stop when they hear the sound. If you keep driving, you live. If you stop, the road marks you, and it follows you home. On the 8th night, at exactly 12:43 a.m., there was a knock on Michael's door. 3 slow knocks. The smell of hot asphalt filled the house. When Michael opened the door, the man stood under the porch light. The same hollow eyes, the same cracked skin, like dry desert ground. The man smiled and said, "You left the road, but the road never left you." 3 days later, Michael vanished. His house was found empty. No signs of struggle, only a trail of sand across the floor. His truck was discovered days later, parked on Route 66. The radio was on, and the whistling was playing. Locals say if you drive that stretch of Route 66 at night and hear a whistling sound, do not stop, do not listen, because the road is always looking for someone new to carry its voice. If you enjoyed this true American horror story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and keep notifications on. More stories are coming, and the next one might sound uncomfortably close.